Welcome back to Rise to Liberty podcast. Today we have a very special guest, but real quick before we do that, I do want to drop our sponsor, which is Nadu Shave Company. There is no reason not to get one of these. There's a reason our grandfathers and fathers used these single blade safety razors for so long. They were the standard before this plastic multi-blade China made shit. Stop buying Harry's, stop buying Dollar Shave Club. They don't care about you. Give your money to somebody that actually does. Nadu Shave Company is family-owned, veteran-owned, family-operated. Either way, veterans and family are involved. And why would you not give your money to somebody that actually gives a shit about you? Nadu Shave Company, I absolutely love it. Make sure and go to NADEAUSHAVECO.com. Use promo code RISE15 for 15% off. Let them know that we sent you. Nadu Shave Company, where tradition beats modernity. Now, today's guest is Austin Picard of the Underclass Podcast. How you doing today, Austin?
I'm doing great, brother. Honestly, first of all, thanks for having me on the show.
Anytime.
It's nice to meet you officially, Jacob, because hearing you on Jose talk about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, it just perfectly, seamlessly fits into this sort of subject matter that I like to cover on my show. And so I really enjoyed it because it hit all, the perfect, just all the perfect topics that are important and that everyone needs to be aware of, that clearly there is an intelligence apparatus that is functioning behind the curtain, that unless you have removed this veil, right, that is socially engineered kind of to distract us and obscure reality, once that's removed, you just can't help but see the patterns, right? And for me, right, they just, at a certain point, like, especially when you start tugging on certain threads, like, man, it's not even a debate anymore how much there is truly such a large footprint when it comes to covert operations domestically in the United States, that our own government, that our own intelligence apparatus is facilitating, undermining the Constitution, undermining our individual sovereignty. And the only way that we can defend ourselves is to be aware of it, first of all.
Yeah.
So
exactly. I mean, there's so many people, and you had mentioned, so I was on No Way Jose, so make sure and everybody go check that out. We started talking about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which largely I came into it as a way to disprove the false memory syndrome, which was used to disprove satanic ritual abuse and just like ritual abuse, mind control, MK Ultra. Like, they use that false syndrome to disprove victims of all of this.
Oh yeah.
And it's a way to cover it up. And that's kind of how I got into it. And so Jose wanted to have me on to talk about it, because I do think it's an important piece of the puzzle, especially when the whole foundation is fake. The syndrome is fake. Nobody's ever been diagnosed with it. You know, like,
not in any, like, the medical journals haven't like accepted it as, like, I mean, it's floated out to the public as if it's a legitimate, but it hasn't at all been legitimized in any medical journals of any kind. So it's truly a pseudoscientific notion.
But yet there's all these doctors backing it up, which is so sinister.
Truly.
So yeah, definitely go and check that out. There's going to be a lot of crossover between all of our shows at this point. So,
right.
But yeah, make sure and go check that out. But let's get into it. So who is Austin, and why did you start the Underclass Podcast?
All right. So I'm 32. I'm from Northwest Arkansas, right? I was born and raised in Northwest Arkansas, and
Clinton country.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that became kind of an eye-opening experience for me, because there was a lot more of a different narrative surrounding the Clintons growing up there. But at the same time, I was deeply misinformed, misled, kind of um, just entirely influenced by Hollywood, our lack of culture, honestly, because it seems like through Tavistock Institute, through the Frankfurt School, it really does seem like social engineering has won the day, and that most of us, whether we know it or not, I mean, you watch Yuri Bezmenov, right, and
Yep.
the 4 stages of ideological subversion, and how he explains that the tenets of Marxism have been pumped into the soft minds of the Americans, public and youth, through public education. I mean, they compromised,
Yep.
right, the education board, or the board of education. So it's just, at a certain extent, it seems like we've all been psyoped into accepting this Marxist philosophy, whether we know it or not. It's almost subconscious in most people, right?
Yeah.
And I see it in conservatives all day long, accepting, such just such totalitarian measures, and acting as if it's in the vein of liberty to any
Yeah.
extent. Just like laughable, man. I can't. I am. I will say I am philosophically opposed to government now, but this all, it was kind of a radical evolution for me
Yeah.
because, again, like I said, I was very misled, and I had to like shake free from a lot of different really bad ideas that were baked into my subconscious mind, and a lot of it was the psychological conditioning aspect of social engineering. And I think a huge aspect of it is how much I idolized celebrities, how much I idolized this hollow, immoral culture that really seems to be a means of degradation, a way to just further disassociate ourselves from the reality we actually reside in. Like, it truly does seem like smoke and mirrors everywhere you look, right? There
Oh yeah.
is, yeah, just these ridiculous narratives that if you pry just an inch below the surface, you realize what a lie, what a facade.
Well,
We've
it's interesting. It seems like what do they call the tabloids are actually more of Hollywood than anything else,
no
you know?
doubt. Yes,
Because that's what gets everyone sucked in. That's what gets all the drama. That's just all of this. That's
exactly.
what gets them. That's Hollywood right there. And that's
Mhm.
where all the psyoping comes from.
Definitely. And so I started, like I said, with very bad ideas. I had no real frame of
Same.
reference for economics. I grew up, we didn't have to worry about anything, but we didn't have a lot of money or anything like that. So it was just like I didn't understand economics very well. And my parents, I love them to death and their intentions are pure, but they didn't quite explain certain things to me that I think should be a major priority um, when you're dealing with your children. But again, I'm not trying to talk bad about my parents. I love them and respect them, and they did right by me. But I do think that there there's a lot, lost in translation, right? When it comes to, and also how many parents are victimized by the same exact social engineering that we're speaking about. So it's not entirely, you know, like, you don't know what you don't know. And if you're
Exactly.
not, yeah, if you're not reading these books, if you're not, I get it, because I know that most people, you're working so much, and when you come home, the last thing you want to do is pry into especially some sort of like sexual blackmail operation or something of that nature. Like,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
last thing that
It's not like right before bed reading. Well,
hell no.
except for maybe, some of us.
Right, exactly. Most people are trying to wind down,
Yep.
stay relaxed, and get some rest for the next day. But so I get it, but it's also like this is the reason that society is almost structured in this way. It's it's meant to distract us from the truth below the surface, the man behind the curtain,
Yeah.
so to speak, right? And so when it comes to like for me, I felt like I don't have children yet, but I plan to have a child, and I just felt like one, I better be prepared and I better know what I need to defend against. And that was really an ultimate concern for me because, man, like the level of the level of just pedophilia within
Yeah.
within government circles, but even worse, right? Like it's perpetuated into this culture, and it's an underground culture that seems to be attempting to surface with things such as NAMBLA, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the North American Man Boy Love Association, which guys like Paul Bonacci, right, from the
Yep.
Franklin scandal, um, he said he was there, present at the foundation of NAMBLA at a Catholic church in Boston, Massachusetts. You
That
know,
does not surprise me.
yeah, and they were all affiliated with Lawrence E. King and the Franklin Scandal Network and all of that. So it just once you're aware of what you actually need to defend against and what you need to be concerned about and the dangers that exist in this world, then you start to think twice about how you raise your children, in my opinion. And I'm glad that I at least throughout this evolutionary process for me, like I'll at least say like it really started when I was forced to reflect on my own life decisions and realize that I was making some bad decisions just based on substance abuse, based on sexual desires, whatever the case was. And thank God I mean, because those are the moments in life where you find out what you're made of, right?
Yeah.
And I think that many people they begin to drown in that moment and they never come back. And I'm very grateful that I could resurface somewhat whole from my experiences. But what I was forced to do was reflect honestly about what I had done and the decisions I had made and why I found myself in this predicament. And in doing so, it forced me to reflect on my beliefs in general, the ideology that I claim to believe in, right? Which
Yeah, it was spoon
clearly
fed and in
right,
indoctrination camps or schools, you know?
exactly,
Yep.
exactly. And
And we're
that
we're
was the
we're
main
90s babies, so, you know?
100%. Yeah,
So and
but
that was a huge psyop the whole decade, you know?
100%, buddy.
So so what was the turning point with you? Like, all of a sudden I mean, obviously, you're not into this at one point, and then all of a sudden
Mhm.
you are.
Yeah.
So, what
You know what's
I
crazy?
assume it was, probably a bit more gradual than just a light switch moment, but
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, well, I got into legal trouble. So, I kind of had, like I kind of, like well, had dealt with, like, living in a small town growing up where I said I grew up. The cops don't have a lot to do, right? And so, I'm just being honest. And so, they will harass you a little bit more often, and especially if and I'm not saying that, like, I wasn't making bad decisions because I was, but I will say that it made me kind of reconsider my perspective on police, my perspective on the justice system in general, and so I was forced through, a lot of different. Um, it was just like knowing the cops by name and having them follow you all the way to your house and stuff like that. Like it was legitimately like a little bit of harassment, right? But at the
yeah,
same time, it's like you're inviting these problems, but still this is a double-edged sword here, and I still don't I'm inherently opposed to it now philosophically as far as, like, over policing. That's absolutely ridiculous. Like, in my
Oh yeah.
opinion, you don't even need to be out among the public. Just sit your ass behind a desk and wait for a call. Like, I'm at
Yeah.
that point, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But anyway, it all really began because for some reason, I I read Dirty Wars because I found Jeremy Scahill through, I think it was through Bill Maher, of all things, right? So
Interesting.
yeah, Real Time with Bill Maher. He had on Jeremy Scahill, and I heard him talk about Blackwater, and I heard him talk about Dirty Wars, and so I bought Blackwater right away, and then I bought the audiobook of Dirty Wars. But when I read through Blackwater and the mercenary complex that ran the terror wars, I mean, it it I just and I will say that I'm almost like naturally anti-war as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that was already a part of my ideals and foundation. So that wasn't very difficult for me um, to maintain that perspective. But reading Blackwater and finding out about Eric Prince and who was the founder of Blackwater. They just changed the
Yeah.
name to like Frontier Services or something after the fact, but they're giving our military men, you know, like actually telling them what to do on the ground in
Yeah.
operational, circumstances, and then finding out what they were doing in like Fallujah and things of that nature. And you had like
Who
Blackwater.
owns them?
Dude, 100%. Blackwater Mercs were like just pushing, like there's this one story about how they just ransacked an entire town and against orders just continued to push and innocent civilians, just destroyed them, rapes, took over an entire town, man. And it wasn't ever and like supposed to be a military order whatsoever.
Yeah.
This was completely on the ground. They just went off script and decided to bloodlust, right? Just
Yeah.
continue on.
It's a straight repeat of some of the things that we saw happen in Vietnam,
100%, man.
which, is what led to a lot of the mind control on one side, and then you have the other side that led to a lot of Gladio.
Oh God.
So, like
Yep. Those stay
it's
behind
just
networks.
yeah, and
My God.
it just seems like this is the continuation of it, is all of these private military contractors.
Definitely.
And then think about what that does to the United States' reputation.
Mhm.
And then like no wonder why people outside the country hate us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're just over here blissfully unaware, going to football
Exactly.
games. It's like
Exactly.
that. Yeah, it's frustrating.
When we invaded Afghanistan, and whenever the troops first entered Iraq, I remember this because um, most people don't seem to have forgotten about the Gulf War and that Iraq War One, right? And
Yep.
so when we re-entered Iraq after 9/11, the first thing they were doing, citizens of Iraq, yelling at our military men, "You already killed my sons. Why are you here? You want to kill my other son?" Like that was
Yeah.
literally what they were saying, right? And man, when you find out what really happened, we switched sides, the Shia Sunni divide, like people are so unaware of and beyond that, I mean, Iraq War 1, we allowed right, we dropped all the leaflets to the Kurds and you know
Yep.
what I mean? And it's like we're trying to get them, "Oh, don't worry, we'll back you up. We'll support you. We'll give you support in air defense and all this other stuff. Just stand up and fight back." And then as they do, we just watch as Saddam just massacres the entire, and takes
Yep.
the oil fields. And then we go, because at first, if you remember, the diplomat for the US to Iraq was basically gave him a blinking green light. Like, whenever Saddam and Iraq were basically asking for a permission to go through with this, uh, we responded by saying, "We don't bother with border disputes in the Middle East. We don't concern ourselves with that." And then
Oh
we
my
use it
God,
as a
what
pretext to
garbage.
invade. Yeah,
What garbage.
exactly. Babies in incubators, right? It's just like,
So
my God.
so would you say it was kind of like, because your story kind of sounds similar to mine, where it was like teen angst,
Yeah,
of like, fuck the system, but then
yeah,
you kind of just fall into these things, whether it's predetermined or not or whatever.
mhm.
That's kind of irrelevant, but where it kind of just was a natural progression of you growing up in a post 9/11 world,
Oh, yeah.
plus experiencing personal things, and you started noticing. Is that fair to say, like, why you are where you are?
Yeah, and definitely, but also if I really kind of reflect again and think about it, like, I was kind of always just especially throughout public school, like, I hated public school. I
Same,
felt within
same,
my heart and soul that it was wrong, right?
same.
And so I kind of bucked authority from day one, just naturally, inherently, it was who I was. I don't know why, but I'm very happy that that was my natural inclination,
Yeah,
because that's what really led me, because in no way, other than the social aspect of meeting friends, did I appreciate, public school or my experience there.
me either.
Eh, Yeah.
I
So,
can think of like less than a handful of teachers maybe that had like a
yeah,
positive impact on me, and I'm
exactly.
thankful for that.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
compared to the amount of teachers I had, a small
Right.
handful is ridiculous,
It's ridiculous. Yeah, definitely.
So,
Yep, and I was always the kid who I needed you to explain why I was supposed to do
me
this.
too. Yep.
Yeah, and so, a lot of problems, arose because of that, but, I'm grateful, like I said, for that, and I think that's why I ended up here
Yeah,
and why I went down this path, honestly, and I was again, man, like, I grew up Southern Baptist, like my grandpa deacon of the Baptist church and all of this, and so then as I get into drugs and I get into to music and everything, I
yeah,
I then completely turn my back on any sort of religious notion, and then I went the exact opposite direction. Found Sam Harris of all people
oh,
before,
yeah,
yeah, before the TDS,
yeah,
which people still, took a little bit more seriously than than now, but at the same time, like, I read quite a few of his books, right? And I was the asshole who even bought Waking Up and gave it to my own mother, who's a Christian, and, like, how insulting is that, right? Like,
yeah,
at least in my opinion, I feel terrible for that because I don't even agree with Sam Harris anymore, and
yeah,
I've grown far past anything that he really had to offer. Um, but at the same time, we have to go through these growing pains, and that was a part of it for me. And so I almost came full circle, but I just truly do feel like I'm more open minded than I ever have been in my life. But for anyone to try and tell you that they can define what God is, like, ah, I don't believe you. That's all I have to say. Like,
yeah,
if you are if you are confidently trying to tell me that you understand and that you can explain it to me, I just don't believe you. I don't think anybody on earth is capable of that. But
yeah.
uh, you know, that's just kind of my opinion. But
I could agree with that. I could
right,
agree with that. I mean, it's always the people that are so sure, like
yeah.
I have a really deep disdain and hatred towards the new age movement,
Oh yes,
you know,
definitely.
and that's where a lot of these cults come from. That's where a lot of this just garbage philosophy comes from, where it's like
Mhm.
bastardized Eastern philosophy and stuff. And
Oh yeah.
there's always people within that movement, and even some like old guard Christian, or some even other weirdos like the Jehovah's Witness. There's people, and I'm great now. They're gonna knock on my door. Uh, there's all these people that are so sure about it, and
Oh yeah.
I don't think our brains have the computing power to be able to understand exactly what any of that is fully. we
Right.
can get a taste of it, which is what I think is a connection to a god or the higher power. But
Right.
we would need the collective computing power of all 8 billion brains to be able to even understand a part of what God actually is. And so one person telling you, I'm weary. I'm like, no, you sound more like a cult leader.
Exactly.
You know?
The level of certainty.
Yeah,
That's my issue. Like,
agreed.
I just like that doesn't mean you can't value things and try and have a pure heart and it, it's sad because I see even people within my own family who are devout who seem to think that if you aren't that level, it's the faith aspect of it, right? And if you aren't, blind in your faith, right? Then your soul is open to corruption. And therefore, I've had family members tell me that whatever I'm reading that's outside of the scripture is coming from Satan. It's coming from the devil. And I'm just like, well, shit, man. I mean, like, that's a ridiculous standard. What are we
Yeah.
doing here, right? Like, how do you
I'm
even
s
learn anything,
I'm
my
screwed
friend?
coming and going.
Yeah. How do you learn anything at all about the
Yeah,
reality you exist in, right?
yeah,
Um, but anyway, I it's the level of certainty that I have an issue with, and I again, my who knows where I'll end up, but
yeah,
like I said, I am attempting to remain objective as I possibly can. But I just want to maintain the best of intentions and really try and
yeah.
approach these subjects with pure intentions because I think
Same.
it's so important, especially when you're talking about some of these victims, man, and some of their families. And it's like what they've already been through, what they've been subjected to,
Yeah.
what the level of overreach,
And then you have
and
a whole, bunch of people that don't believe you or call you crazy on top of that.
no shit, which is the
Yeah.
worst thing ever. And that's
Yeah,
like
that's the worst thing you could do, you know?
100%, man. And that's what I found so fascinating about FMSF and the false memory
Yep.
syndrome was, man, talk about gaslighting a victim, you
Yeah,
know?
gaslighting the victims and demonizing pretty much, like, all psychiatrists and counselors and stuff because
Right.
apparently it's their fault, you know?
Oh my god. That's so
So,
crazy to me.
um,
But go
so
ahead.
this is I wanna touch on you being objective in this, which is why I like your show so much, which is why I like the way that you handle these subjects. But that's
Thank you.
that's what I wanted to ask. Where did the Underclass podcast come from? Like, and
Oh, okay.
I know
So
I had a light switch moment with mine where it was like, screw it, I'm starting a show. I don't care if
right.
the market's flooded, whatever, it doesn't matter. Here we
Mhm.
go. So what was your moment?
I felt like I wanted I one, I felt like I had to do something with my life that I viewed worthwhile, right? I wanted to look myself in the eyes and say that I'm at least attempting to pursue something that's worth my time. I don't know why, but but that was a huge part of it because I felt like I didn't really have much of a purpose that I was and I think that's such a huge thing that's just causing so much strife and internal, problems and psychologically with the vast majority of the public. I think so many of us are suffering from this, from a sense of some sort of identity crisis, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with embracing that celebrity culture and trying to put on a mask and fit in. When in
Yeah.
reality you should be identifying your principles and your core foundation because otherwise, what do you stand for
Yep.
when the time comes, right? Do you have anything to stand on worthwhile? And so I was feeling that so much in my life, man. I felt I just I had to pursue a passion, and I knew all I was doing for 10 years straight was accumulating reliable sources. And I was like, "Why am I doing this? I feel like I'm fucking crazy, right? I'm
Yeah.
going schizo and everything." And, and, but in reality, it was my growth process, my evolution. And so, yeah, once I found uh it was pretty much like a process of being exposed to certain books like The Operators by Michael Hastings, and then working through my bad ideas as far as economics were concerned. I found Ron Paul, which, you know, I
God
I
bless
love
that
that
man.
man. Yeah. I
Yeah,
will love
really.
that man till the day I die, right?
Yep.
And so finding him, finding guys like Scott Horton, that I view as such just valuable source resources of information and knowledge that's just so it should be top
Yeah.
priority for all of us to understand, you know,
I
foreign
swear Scott
policy.
Horton is inhuman sometimes, just what he
It's
can keep up
nuts.
in his brain.
Mhm. It's
It's
mind-boggling. He's
it's
one of
it's
my
something.
all-time favorites, right?
Yeah, but for that subject, people need to be at that level. They need to
Definitely.
understand this, and that's what pisses me off about people having opinions about these outside country conflicts.
Agreed.
It's like your only opinion should be we should not be funding it. you know,
Exactly.
like outside of that, you shouldn't have a personal opinion on whatever the hell the conflict
Exactly.
is. You don't even know who your county commissioners are. You don't
Right.
know you don't attend a city council meeting, but yet
Mhm.
you have an opinion about how, Israel and Palestine's going to end.
Exactly.
Go fuck
Exactly.
yourself.
Exactly.
you
Thank
know?
you.
Like it's
And the
it's garbage.
consequences of American foreign policy,
Yeah. Yeah.
nation building. I mean, come on. What this
Election
it
rigging and
Yeah. I
political
mean,
assassinations.
my gosh. I mean, it is absolutely absurd that anybody and what's our national debt, everyone? You wanna go fund another war? Like,
Yeah.
l not even considering the moral implications of that, like, that it's just stupid. It doesn't even make sense, right?
We don't have the money. Even if we wanted to go do these immoral things, we don't have the money.
Exactly, man.
And what do you do when you don't have the money? You sit home and don't go to the movies with your friends?
Exactly, dude. It's just
Uh,
crazy to me. But what mainly it was that made me go all in and say, "Now's the time," was COVID, man. Like, it was COVID. Because the reaction to COVID, or
yeah.
whatever you wanna call it, the government overreach, the manufactured crisis, right? That
Oh, yeah.
that I mean, because, luckily, my mind was in the right place leading up to it. So, I was already on to Event 201 and Operation Lockstep and, Project Crimson Contagion and, all the
Yep.
different simulations, all the different ways you can rebrand the Great Reset, right? Which
Yep.
is that's absolutely ridiculous, but a reality, and Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 are United Nations goals, and they're set in stone, everyone. So
Mhm.
you can go and read them, and they will tell you what they want to accomplish. And I think we even talked about this recently on Already Dead with Charlie. Was the tat was the Committee of 300 and through Tavistock, right? Limits to growth,
Yep.
where they tell us the plan, and then we're going to
Yeah,
have
they
natural
have to.
asset corridors and all of this, right? And so 15-minute cities, everyone, right?
Yep.
We'll get rid of
Digital ID,
70%. Do what?
CBC digital ID coming down with the 15-minute cities.
Yep, biometric
They tell
IDs,
all of us.
100%, man. Yeah, and the central bank digital currency, like you said, like, that is the future.
Yep.
And by the way, you hear them, talk about, like Klaus Schwab talking about the cyber pandemic. It will, make COVID pale in comparison, and then you research Operation Cyber Polygon, and a few of those different simulations, looks like it's around the corner is all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
And, uh, and what happens if they replace the internet? What happens if a cyber attack happens? They blame Russia or something, and they bring down the internet for a day, 24 hours, maybe even less than, because they'll already have, through the problem reaction solution template, the solution waiting in the wings, which will be the new modern internet, which will, in my opinion, be entirely based around know your customer KYC verification
Yep.
access without even getting online. You can't even access a website
Yep.
without verifying your identity and your
Yep.
location.
Which is
Okay.
why so I live in the state of Utah, which we're one of the states that have made it so you have to identify yourself, upload your ID to be able to access certain adult websites. And
Right.
granted, I'm not a consumer of adult media.
Right.
However, nonetheless, I'm over here screaming like, don't do this, because once this happens, this is a Trojan horse. Like,
Definitely.
and it's so funny because it's was sold to everyone under the guise of, won't somebody please help the children, or
Mm.
won't we think of the children?
Oh god.
You don't want kids doing this. And you know what? Fuck Tim Pool for doing this, because he talks
Right.
about it a lot too. It's like,
Mhm.
well, you don't want kids looking at this. It's like, well, no. But the solution isn't forcing you to upload your identification
Right. It's
to
like
some third party company.
right, right. And, I mean, I lean libertarian most of the time, honestly, just philosophically, because it's like, leave me the fuck alone.
Yeah.
And but that's my problem with Tim Pool drives me insane, and he has for quite a while. And,
I think that
it
beanie's a little too tight.
right? But it's just like the idea that, and I get it, man. Like, there's probably more bad parents than there are good parents. I don't know. I hate to be self-defeating in that way, but it seems that way a little bit. But at the same time, it's like it. I never want to decide for another person when it comes to how you parent your children. I mean,
Yeah.
to up to a certain extent, where you know what I mean. It's like, and even then, it's like I feel like, man, it's not my place or whatever, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just like I would rather be left alone. And so the worst thing you can ever do is set a precedent for government intervention of any
Yep.
kind. And so that is clear as day to me. Always going to be a mistake because government only abuses power. That is all
Yep.
they know how to do.
And,
So
even though he was kind of a terrible person, there's a lot of good quotes attached to him. But Ronald Reagan always said that there was nothing more permanent than a temporary government program,
right,
and that
that is
they
a
never get
great quote.
repealed. They
Hmm.
they get introduced and then that's it. They
Right,
never get sunsetted.
right.
So, and I don't hear any politician, no matter the complex built around them, talking about repealing them. Now, I will give God King Trump
Mhm.
that his I will rightfully agree, he did repeal
Mm.
some acts. There was some like executive order he passed where every new law means you have to repeal two. And you know what? That's probably the best thing he's ever done
It
right
probably,
there.
yeah.
You
Oh,
know?
bump stock Don, man.
Yep,
Uh,
exactly.
right?
So, oh my god. But I completely agree. It's this idea that the government is our babysitter.
Yeah.
You know, parents
Daddy
need to be
government.
concerned about what their kids are doing online. And you know what?
Mm,
If you feel like you can't trust your kid,
mm,
or if you feel like the internet's too predatory, then stop buying them iPhones and iPads
exactly.
just because it's the cool thing, and giving them unfettered access to the internet.
Dude.
Like, the internet isn't like, I would never just give a monkey a loaded gun, you know?
Exactly, right? Like, it's absolutely crazy, man.
And
And
it's
that's such a great such a
yeah.
great comparison, man. It really is. Um, I just, daddy government, right? It's like,
Mhm.
what do you need to witness to realize that they aren't in this to protect us? I
Yeah.
mean, my god. But anyway, I just think that it's boiled down to, well, again, the reason that I greenlit my podcast to start the underclass was because of COVID and how I witnessed it fracture my own family from within. And I feel like that was one of the primary goals, you know? Um, and
100%.
yeah, and that devastated me, man. Like, people I love so much, right? And to see them so blinded by the partisan divide, right? Just unable to reason, use their logical minds. Like, it was impossible. And it's like you couldn't even start to have the conversation,
Nope.
you know? Really remember that, man. Like, in the heat of it, right? Like, it was impossible. And I'm very grateful that I at least reached my mom before all of that happened, and she loved me enough to take me seriously in certain ways. And and thank God for that, because man, I've seen one of my best friends, man, you know, in a coma, because
Yeah.
in my opinion, because of that, because
Yep.
of the vaccine. Sorry, but
No,
anyway,
no, it's
um,
we'll we'll definitely have to get into that at some point because
right,
I have a feeling that we'll probably not be able to cover all of this in one episode, so we'll have to have you
right,
back. But
hell yeah,
there's the people who refuse not to take it. There's not a single one of us that regret not taking it.
no,
There's
no,
not a single one, and I can see all over the place. There's plenty of people, hundreds of thousands of people that regret taking it.
oh yeah,
So all for very different reasons.
hmm
Um, I mean, I put out a tweet yesterday. I thought it was interesting. At one point, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people have forgotten this, but at one point, there was such disdain for the people not taking it
mm.
that the government created military style strike forces, is what they called them. They called them a strike force, meant to go into communities and help with the vaccination
Vaccine
effort.
hesitancy, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so they went in to go intimidate people into taking it. And
Oh, yeah.
they went in decked out, full military garb, everything to go intimidate people. And that's
God,
the level of where we were just not that long ago,
not long at all.
And that seems to have been wiped from everyone's memory.
Really does. Yep. It's honestly, it's probably it has to be the biggest psyop that I've ever seen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, in real time, like that was insane. And by the way, I'm in LA right now, and I was in LA all through COVID, right? And so what I will say is the pro was that the traffic was awesome and the parking was great. You know what I'm saying? I missed that a little bit,
Yeah.
but never worth it, obviously. But at the same time, it was very strange to be here during all of that.
I bet.
And to this day, man, like, the level of mask wearing is uh, I mean, it honestly is blowing my mind. Like, to this morning, I'm seeing it, and it's just, talk about psychological conditioning. I mean, these people are so petrified to just be alive. You know,
Breathe air.
yeah, man.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine putting on hand sanitizer like that? Like, I don't know, like, look into hand sanitizer a little bit. It's not very healthy, I'm just saying, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're
We're supposed
destroying
to
your
have
natural
some good
bacteria.
germs.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I don't I mean, I understand as far as the psyop, right? But and how it really, because well, here's an example, like, I have an individual in my family, which I hate to be throwing him under the bus like this, but I'm not saying names.
I'm
But
sure we all have at least one.
right, right. But the level of, like, Trump derangement syndrome, for example, I'm no fan of Donald Trump because I don't trust that
Me
man
either.
for one moment. And I think, if anything, he's probably more um a precedent setting operation that is
Yep.
going to facilitate and usher in the desired end result. And I really do believe that is kind of the direction that we're perpetually heading in. And
Yep.
and I think he's like anyway. But my main concern is that, which Operation Warp Speed, by the way, right? Like, come on, everybody. It
And he
kills me
won't he
inside.
he won't say anything at all negative about it.
Mm-mm.
He gave that little gremlin Fauci everything he
Everything.
asked for.
My God.
Gave Fauci a blank check and said, "Go for it."
Which, by the way, RFK Jr., my favorite thing he's ever done. He's really gone full retard in many ways. and
Yeah,
and obviously, his perspective on Israel Palestine, I think, might be a result of his potentially being compromised, but I don't know. I'm not entirely certain. I do
yeah, I'm
know.
pretty sure there's probably some, blackmail, or
That's what I
there's
think.
something behind the scenes, and
Did you ever
they
see
said
Richard Booth mention his sex diary that his wife
I
found?
did not.
Yeah, so RFK Jr. had a wife who found the sex diary and was apparently like completely just disgusted, and enough to go through with committing suicide, right?
Interesting.
And
Hmm,
there's a picture of
interesting how
Jeffrey
that keeps
Epstein.
happening around this one
Oh
family.
yeah. And there's a picture of Jeffrey Epstein hanging out with his arm right there on RFK Jr., his now dead wife from the suicide sitting next to them. And the facial expressions are very interesting on those individuals in that picture. But it's a very suspicious thing, and
Yeah,
to see his ability to interpret the Ukraine conflict,
yeah,
and then to see him be so ridiculous in regard
yeah,
to diagnosing the Palestinian conflict, like, it's just absolutely ridiculous, man. And
and
to me,
he's
I
so
cannot
good on
see.
other things,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
again, that was my point, is that I have his book, right?
Yeah,
The Real Anthony Fauci, and one of the greatest things that he's ever done, in my opinion, because that book is
agreed.
extraordinary, man. And I really do love what he did when he went on Joe Rogan and he talked about vaccines. I felt like it was such an important conversation that needed to be on a platform of that magnitude that I almost cried, man. Like, it was that, to hear him tell that story of that mom who watched who watched her young boy suffer from autism after getting the vaccines, and to hear the stories of how that occurred so many different times, the same exact circumstances, the same reactions and situations. It's
Yeah,
I just think that big pharma is one of the most evil entities that exists on planet Earth at this moment, and clearly, right, the liability measures with the vaccines is one of the most pertinent dangers that exist today. I mean, really is, and I think they're going to
I
merge
agree.
this. They're going to merge that with the biometric ID that we were just talking about, the CBDC, and then it'll look like just what Trudeau did to that old grandma whenever she supported the trucker protests.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't get your most recent booster, so it looks like you can't withdraw any funds today.
Yeah, guess you're
Your
gonna starve.
Yeah, your social credit score, it's really suffering. So now your friends don't want to associate with you anymore because it's
Yep.
really dinging their social credit. And it's just like, that's really in the cards,
Yeah.
right? I mean, my God.
No, I
But
mean, it's already going on in China,
exactly. Yeah.
and it's been going on over there for a little over a decade now, you know,
Hmm.
and they just keep ramping it up. I mean, they can shut off entire parts of cities,
Oh, yeah.
because they
Yep.
have those turnstile like exits and entrance doors that like
My
the
God.
zoo would have or something, like those big like they're like polished stainless steel turnstile like cage things, and there's like barbed wire on top of them and everything. There's no getting through them unless you scan whatever you
Right.
have to scan to get through. And then once you go through that turnstile thing, you can't go back,
No.
through the other direction. So I mean, they can shut off entire coordinates of cities. And
That is
it's
so crazy.
and if you're stuck there, oh well,
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Seriously, man. Wow,
it's
that is crazy.
yeah, the level of control, which is why, like, okay, even if that's all a pipe dream, it's not, but say it is, why would you
Mm,
even give the people who have the ability to make that happen
right.
more power and money? And why would you defend these people
Mhm.
of everybody, you know?
Right. Seriously, man. Especially when there are stories like Confessions of a DC Madam, and you see the
Yes.
level of involvement, even the White House, the Secret Service, it's it seems to be and Detective James Rothstein,
Yes.
NYPD, right? One of the very first detectives, and he was basically operating his own task force within the NYPD, um, in regard to human trafficking, right? And he started his investigations in 1969, as late as 1969, and he basically exposed that like with him and his colleagues, what they discovered was that their conclusion was up to 70% of elected government officials in the United States government are compromised by sexual blackmail network.
That is so many. That is
Right?
so many.
Mhm. And I
Well,
mean, it makes perfect sense, especially with like Deborah Jean Palfrey happening.
yeah,
And she claimed that one of the clients utilizing her services, just so happened to be one of the final candidates in the 2016 presidential election. And then she says that she's not going quiet into that dark night
yeah,
and says, "I will not commit suicide, Alex Jones. I say it
yeah,
here on air." And Alex Jones even went on Geraldo Rivera and had this conversation. And I was surprised that even on Geraldo Rivera at that time, everybody agreed she didn't kill herself. I was just like,
yeah,
"Whoa, that is very extraordinary." But yeah, she claims she was going to name names if and reveal her client list if they wouldn't at least tell her why they targeted her legally, right? And
yeah.
she's pretty sure it was because she had decided to close down the operation and that they were utilizing it for sexual blackmail purposes. So
Did
then Deborah,
you
do what?
did you happen to watch the most recent, Tucker Carlson Joe Rogan interview?
I didn't actually.
So it's definitely worth a watch
Okay.
at least once all the way through. It was very well done, but there was a point where Tucker Carlson kinda let something slip, and it was brought up, I saw for a minute, but it's now kinda disappeared,
Hmm.
that a lot of people have told Tucker Carlson, like, to a lot of public figures have told him to his face that Congress is terrified that if these people don't play along, the FBI will implant on their computer,
Just child porn.
yeah, child porn.
Yeah. Oh my
So
god, dude.
so these people are being held against their will, even if they're not into it. So
Wow,
it's
that
at a
fits
level,
so perfect.
yeah, you don't even have to have the blackmail at this point. And
I've heard
then
the NSA is capable of this. I
mhm,
heard that the NSA can easily, and I'm sure more than just the NSA. I mean, there's what, 17 different intelligence agencies?
yep,
Probably more than that at this point, but but I mean, it's like I'm sure they aren't the only ones with that capability, but to me it yeah, that is 100% possible that
yeah,
they can implant child porn onto
yep,
your computer
yeah,
without
and
your knowledge.
there was a congressman whose wife testified to that,
Wow.
that's what happened to him. And then
My god.
everyone laughed it off and said, "You're crazy, that doesn't happen." And it's like, but the intelligence agencies are the ones that collect it when they bust these guys.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
technically, they have a massive collection, like,
dude.
these sick fucks,
I'm gonna
you
make a
know?
note to cover this again when I come back because I can't remember the details on it and I can't remember the name, but there was this huge scandal that erupted that a large majority of government representatives in the US were discovered with child porn. And
Yes.
so it's got a name and everything, this scandal, and I can't remember the details right now, but I noted it down a while back, and I forgot about it until you just mentioned that. So I'm gonna have to dig a little bit deeper later,
What's
and I'll
funny,
come back with it,
I
but
think I know what you're talking about. Was it the one where BuzzFeed was the one that blew the whistle
I'm
on
almost
that?
positive, yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly the one, yep.
So at the time, I looked into that as well because at first I was like, BuzzFeed, you
Right.
guys are like a leftist, like, you know, zillennial like tabloid thing. Like,
Mhm.
you're gonna give me a 12 question quiz on what Seinfeld character I am, you know?
Right, right.
Like, what type of book would I be? Like, that sort of junk, and I'm like, "You guys busted this," so I looked into it, and it's not the only story out there.
Oh, sh
Apparently, this has been happening since the '70s,
oh
you
my
know? This has happened at least 6 times that I could find, and I'm like, "So it's crazy." So, yeah, it's kind of interesting, which is actually what brings me to get to really what I wanted to ask you about, because
Mhm,
these are we've covered a lot of topics. Like, if people are in the know, they know, and I'm sure people have heard some, maybe not others, all of this stuff. But moving towards the most accepted conspiracy theory, which I hate that term, and we'll
mm,
get into that, but
mhm.
the Kennedy assassination.
Right, right.
So
100%.
it's the most accepted conspiracy out there.
Yeah,
Um, And to me, that's crazy. It
it
was
is.
a coup by the CIA. The CIA killed a sitting president, and everyone just says, "Yeah, that happened."
Mhm.
Okay, and? Like,
Right.
you're not outraged?
Mhm.
Um, so I guess what I wanna ask is, even just starting from that point, you yourself said, you've dealt with some family that have kinda not been in favor of some of these subjects and stuff.
Mhm.
I have as well. But how do you approach these topics with, I guess, newbies to it?
Right.
People that aren't in the know, people that have probably heard of a couple of things, but are, "Nah, that's crazy." Like, how do
Mhm.
you approach this with these new people?
Yeah, it really for me, it always depends on the individual. You gotta kinda read the room a little bit because, like, if we're talking I'm talking to my liberal aunt or something, right? And I'm attempting to get them to at least consider this as a possibility, like some sort of I don't know, with JFK, it's just at this point it's pretty easy to make that case with almost anyone, because most everyone is at least aware that CIA was involved and that
Yep.
JFK most people consider the Bay of Pigs, motive, right? And
Yeah.
that's I don't know how many casual people are aware of Bay of Pigs, but it seems to be out there in the public as a narrative. So that kind of blows me away a little bit. But at a certain point, it's like I think the motivation uh, to do it in that way, like, was almost a flex, right? Like this is what happens.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's what it seemed like to me, and so, um, and that group that consolidated power after JFK was assassinated, like, they seem to be able to pass the buck and they consistently remained in power, and that's how it
Yeah.
felt, and so but to, like, approach some of these darker subjects with some of these people, like, I almost act as if they agree with me already. I'm almost psyoping them in a way, right? Like,
Yeah.
I swear to God, that's my approach to with certain people and almost in general at this point, because I feel like the more you behave as if you already agree with this, right? the person is kind of like they're kind of like, I don't know, caught off guard in a way, but they don't, most of the time you're dealing with people who aren't, they don't have a lot of these details, right?
Yeah.
And so they seem to almost kind of be insecure with the amount of knowledge that they have acquired, and it seems like there's a lot of them are almost terrified to have a conversation, right? And so you can kind of dictate where the conversation goes, but as long as you don't make it um argumentative, I think that's the main goal. And so you
Yeah.
can, I try very hard to, when they might make a point that I don't agree with, I'll I'll grant them the point, but I'll then in a roundabout way completely argue against it. But it sounds like we're agreeing in a way,
Yeah.
right? And so that's kind of the way that I approach it now, because I think that having any debates, it seldomly really makes much of a difference. And I
Agreed.
am more about having productive conversations no matter who I'm talking to. So I just think that that's kind of the best way to go about it, because most of the time, if you start, if you kind of are more aggressive, a wall goes up immediately and
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not going to get through it, you know? And so the very least you can do is they're going to go away from the conversation with what they want to take from it. And you have to realize that as well, because we all, I think the natural process when the veil falls is you got to go save everybody that you love, right? You're like,
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
you go into a little bit of a panic mode, like,
100%.
and I would like to make a point that I think, you know, of course, people that are, I guess, anti-conspiracy or on the other side, like, none of this can happen, just totally, in my opinion, just
Mhm.
brainwashed
Oh
to
yeah.
the idea. Um, I don't want to be right, okay?
I
I
try and
don't
say that
want
a
this
lot.
to be true,
Yeah,
you know? Like, I
definitely.
wish I was wrong.
100%, dude.
When you say that this is wrong, this isn't true, I wish it were true, but there are certain things that are well documented that you
Mhm.
cannot deny, you know?
Right.
Like, this isn't fun for me, you know?
Exactly.
I
Brother,
mean,
I sit in
it's
this rec
crazy.
room and I read these stories. And I remember when I did the Mark Dutroux episode and I read the ex-victim's account. I cried, man.
Yeah,
I cried,
yeah,
man. And I've never viscerally turned away from the screen and gone, "Fuck that. I can't read it." Like, it was that bad, right?
yeah,
I'm an emotional person, I'll be honest,
yeah,
but at the same time, it's like, you should be after that. I mean, my god, right? And so,
yeah,
but I agree with you, like, having the conversations with, it's, you always have to address the fact that the last thing you would ever want is for this to be the case, right? I mean, my
mhm,
god, man. I was dragged into this kicking and screaming, hoping to God that this wasn't the reality. You
yeah,
know, I didn't come into this expecting to start uncovering all these sexual blackmail operations and child trafficking networks, you know? It's just, unfortunately, one, it's very, very lucrative. People need to understand, like, sociopaths exist, all right?
mhm,
And pedophiles exist, all right? And I think that people just have to realize that running guns, running drugs, yeah, it's lucrative, but running humans, that's a different story, right? And I
yeah,
can only hope that people will take that seriously, because with that, right, comes the levers of power that have constructed a system to insulate themselves from consequences.
yeah,
And when you find that out, that they have changed prosecutors, swapped judges, you know, I mean, le beyond the fact that we've had detectives who are moral with integrity, the ones who refuse to stay quiet, the ones who decide, "I don't care what the consequences are, I have to get the truth out."
Yeah.
I mean, they get Terrence Yankeed, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's exactly what happens, right? And And so to have somebody like Detective James Rothstein, that he's a great source, and I've been utilizing him lately because he connects all this. He arrested Frank Sturgis, one of the Watergate burglars, and he, he's just I couldn't believe how, he was the one investigating the process in upstate New York at this time on Long Island and everything. And he tracked them, gave them a geographical designation, said that when the NYPD was cracking down on them in the early six or late 60s, that he saw the process pick up and leave town, and he basically tracked them into Wisconsin and to the Jeffrey Dahmer scenario. And it was just absolutely crazy to hear that he had even tracked it down to this Untermeyer Park where all of the rituals were taking place at the time.
Yeah.
He had discovered mass graves of Alsatian German Shepherd dogs, and because they were a large part of the sacrificing that was taking place. Uh, the Children Cult, which is just an offshoot of the Process Church,
Yeah.
and it turns out that Robert de Grimston, the founder of the Process, he was living in this area at the time, and even was he was even visited by another detective. And this detective said that when he went and knocked on his door, de Grimston answered the door, and somebody answered the door. De Grimston comes to the door, and as soon as he begins to interrogate him, he acts as if he's psychologically, like, as if he's basically mentally retarded, like he can't understand him at all, and then he just shuts the door in his face. That's what he did to the detective.
Oh my god.
Yeah, yeah. But I just thought, like, wow, that is completely ridiculous. You can just do that? Right? But anyway,
Wow.
yeah, crazy, but he really outlined how these groups utilized biker gangs to, like, basically show their colors, sport their colors,
Yeah.
in order to keep the police away while they were performing their rituals, to keep anyone else, out of it as well, and also to, help procure children. I mean, you had, informants that, you know, 100% attested to actual ritual sacrifices where, like, Eton Pates, who was, like, one of the first kids put on a milk carton, kinda like Johnny Gosh, right?
Yeah.
And he was taken and sacrificed it in within this process, and yeah, it's just absolutely ridiculous when you can point to evidence of these networks existing, and you can actually point to someone like Roy Cohn literally being he admitted to Rothstein that he was running little boys for a sexual blackmail operation, to blackmail, prominent politicians, right? And
I mean, granted, this is the guy that also blackmailed the FBI,
yeah, J.
and
Edgar
I mean,
Hoover. Yeah.
Cohn,
Yeah,
the
Trump's
Trump's lawyer,
mentor.
you know?
So crazy, man.
Um, there's all these weird connections. Now, one thing I did wanna ask you,
Mhm.
so we have all of these things that we can point to, and people, for whatever reason, have still weaponized the term conspiracy theory or conspiracy
Oh,
theorist, or
man.
that's just a conspiracy.
You
Do
know
you
why that
do
is though,
you
right?
well, that's actually what I wanted to ask you about,
Right.
because that's, I mean, I have my own opinions, but,
Mhm.
do you believe that it was actually the CIA that weaponized that
I do.
after the JFK assassination?
I do, 100%. Yeah, and it seems like they're the ones who came up with the term. They coined the term in the first place, and it was in order to basically they wanted to present anyone who disagreed with the Warren Commission report and the official version of the story put
Yeah.
forward by the CIA and the Rockefeller Commission and right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that they were basically a communist sympathizer who might as well be Lee Harvey Oswald, right? Like
You
that
might
was
as well have pulled the trigger.
100%, man. And I mean, when you realize that they actually coined this term in a memo, that they
Yeah.
resort to using that
They
term,
had meetings.
conspiracy theories, and they use it as a pejorative, right? Like,
Yeah.
which to me is entirely to undermine and dismiss any criticism of the official narrative, including conspiracy theories. This is the quote: have frequently thrown suspicion on our organization. For example, by falsely alleging that Lee Harvey Oswald worked for us. That's a quote. We do not recommend that discussion of the assassination question be initiated where it is not already taking place. Where discussion is active, however, addressees are requested: A, to discuss the publicity problem with liaison and friendly elite contacts, especially politicians and editors. Urge them to use their influence. B, to employ propaganda assets. Book reviews and feature articles are particularly appropriate for the purpose. This is the internal memo that many people pointed to as the smoking gun, unequivocally proving that the CIA purposefully popularized the term in order to facilitate a cover-up and deceptively discredit anyone who questioned the official line as a communist sympathizer. Like, that's exactly
Yeah.
what happened, you know? So
Yeah.
anybody,
It makes sense.
I mean, anyone who disagrees with that, they haven't read that memo. Like that, it
Yeah.
has to be. Imagine one of my favorite things about the narrative, like imagine killing the president at 12:30 p.m. Then 5 minutes later, you calmly have a conversation with a Dallas police officer in the lunchroom of the Texas School Book Depository. And according
Yeah.
to Dallas Deputy Sheriff Roger Craig, who was on duty in Daly Plaza that day, within 30 minutes, Oswald somehow slipped out of the place unchallenged, walked 4 blocks east on Elm Street, caught a bus back west through heavy traffic for 2 blocks, got off the bus, walked 2 more blocks west before turning south on Lamar Street. After walking 4 blocks and having a brief conversation with a woman and a cab driver over the use of the cab, the taxi takes him to 500 North Beckley Street, but the boarding house where he lived was located at 1026 North Beckley. He had to walk to the rooming house in order to pick something up, suggested to be a jacket or a handgun or both. And if that isn't enough, the housekeeper where Oswald lived testified that at 1:05 p.m. he was waiting for a bus in front of his rooming house. Finally, to make him the fastest man on earth, he walked to East 10th Street and Patton Street, several blocks away, and killed Officer J.D. Tippett between 1:05 and 1:08 p.m. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, how are we gonna believe this story, right? Like, he
Yeah.
is a superhero if he's capable of everything they claim he did that day,
Well,
and
and it's
go
not
ahead.
even just him. It's you lay out there's a few different like foundations and projects that have actually been built around laying out the JFK timeline.
Yeah. Mhm.
And there's a few sources you can find online that are like interactive. You can click on it and see all the different things. And
That's awesome.
when yeah, I'll have to find one and send it to you because
Yeah.
it's interesting being able to see it on a timeline.
Yeah.
And when you do, I never realized how quickly everything happened.
Mhm.
Like they pretty much like had him loaded him into a box on an airplane,
Yep.
like just minutes after, like to the point where to me, it's like they planned it.
Oh,
Imagine
God,
that, like
brother.
it happened
Pri
so quickly. They were
The
just
way
like
he comes
holding the
down to that
box underneath him.
hairpin turn that makes him,
Yep.
lower the speed to that, give him the clean shot, like, that's what it was about, and when you read the prior assassination plots in Chicago and Miami,
Yeah.
it's exactly how they had it planned. Like, it's so crazy, the Abraham Bolden story,
Yeah.
the Secret Service agent, he's like the first African American Secret Service agent too, like, kind of crazy story, and yeah, he was, like, tortured. for telling the truth over all
Yeah.
of this. They got him on some fake charge and then put him in solitary and had him in this medical wing where they were torturing his ass, giving him like force feeding him drugs. It's like this one of the it's a sad story, man.
Yeah.
But I mean, the plot in Chicago was prevented by a telephone informant who only identified himself as Lee. I was like, "Get the
Hmm.
fuck out of here." That is insane, right?
Yeah.
And, so the patsy was Thomas Arthur Valley, all right? And like Oswald, he's a former Marine, political misfit. Both had served at top secret Marine bases in Japan that hosted the U-2 spy plane.
Oh,
That's a whole 'nother
interesting.
story because it seems like Oswald was sent on a fake defector program to Russia. And when he was sent to, I believe it was the Monterey Language Institute, I believe is the one, which is affiliated with a lot of these, operations. And they claim that he spoke Russian like it was his natural language, right? At that point. And so, yeah. And so then, he acts in this fake defector program. He defects to Russia, and the whole time, everywhere that he goes while he's in the Soviet Union, the U-2 spy plane goes.
Hmm.
And allegedly, he's got like he's armed with legitimate intelligence to use as a hangout, right? As basically to help, you know, leverage his own credibility with some of these individuals that he's dealing with within the Soviet Union. So if he gives them workable intelligence and they go and find it to be accurate, then the idea is that, okay, well, he gains credibility. They'll believe he actually did defect. But it turns out that the Soviet Union was entirely aware of this this fake
Yeah.
defector program. So they almost were just identifying these defectors as CIA spooks, like every single
Yeah.
one of them. They just considered them to be. So I found that to be just absolutely ridiculous that that was the narrative surrounding him. But yeah, that I forget the name of the air base in Japan, but the U-2 spy plane was a big part of this, and it got
Yeah.
shot down to guess what? Provide a precedent to squash the peace summit. The timing fits.
Interesting.
Yes, dude.
Yeah.
It makes it so much more, okay, Oswald was undercover. He's running, limited basically, he's it's just so crazy. He's giving this credible intelligence to the Soviet Union just in time for them to shoot down the U-2 spy plane in order to
Yeah.
call off the peace summit. Like, to me, that's by design, right?
Oh,
And
it has to be. I
mhm.
mean, I don't know about you at this point, but I don't believe in coincidence.
No, not anymore,
Like,
man.
I started really thinking about it, and I mean, everything's chalked up to a coincidence, but
Mhm,
once you start really thinking about the probability of what would it have to exist for a real coincidence to
mhm.
actually exist, just the mathematical probability of something being a coincidence is so astronomical.
It really
It's
is.
it's like trillions to one, like
Mhm,
hundreds of trillions to one. Like the the probability of it being a coincidence is just so unlikely
mhm.
that I I just don't believe in them because
Agreed.
I can't. It's mathematically so impossible for a coincidence to be
Mhm.
that common. I mean, that's
Right.
kind of the point, that's the definition. So, but
Exactly.
these days between, you know, Project Mockingbird or Operation Mockingbird,
Oh
um,
gosh.
and I mean, we've got things like COINTELPRO.
Oh, man.
They're
Operation Chaos.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, in PatCon recently,
Oh
we've
god,
got
man.
all of these things where they're controlling narrative and counter
Mhm.
narrative.
You hear Ken, Silva, did you read the Fed files where he basically kind of outlines how how PatCon never ended.
Oh,
And
that doesn't
and
surprise me.
right, and how Charlottesville and all these neo-Nazi events
Yep,
where, "Oh, it looks like the Proud Boys and Antifa are at it again."
yep.
They're all just pretty much manufactured political theater. Yes, there are true devout believers within the
Oh, yeah.
groups, of course, like always, they exist, but the leadership's compromised, is mostly that's always the case,
Yep.
and, I if not the group itself inherently and, created by the intelligence agencies to
Yep.
begin with, which
Patriot
happens
Front.
so often. Yeah, exactly, right? And
Um,
you mentioned Mockingbird.
yeah.
My god, man. When I realized the effect well, one, just I mean, clearly Mockingbird was institutionalized and they, they
Yeah.
were manufacturing media operatives and just inserting them in all the most prominent publications that existed already. And then, I mean, the Washington Post is it's the CIA's voice box. That's all it
Oh, yeah.
really is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's as far as I understand, they, you know, through some shell corporations and different
Yep.
ways to organize the finances, they actually own it. So,
Yeah.
and
This makes so
I
much
I
sense.
don't I don't know if you ever saw, like, how they ended Mockingbird, on the public scale, but they basically said, "Well, we took the public's concerns about this and we determined that it was right that it's not right for us to have
Mm,
influence in the media, so
mhm.
what we're going to end the contracts that we have now, but we're going to still open up this thing to where the media can call us and work with
Right,
us."
right,
And it's like, so now you're putting it on the media, so the
right.
media contacts you, you're not contacting the media, like, if that
Oh
somehow makes
my
it
god.
better.
That is absolutely absurd. I
So
know I did a Mockingbird episode, and I'm gonna have to go back over my notes again because it was a while back, but I remember that the Telecommunications Act of 1996, then the 2011 or 2012, um, Bill Clinton or not Bill Clinton, but, another telecommunications act. It was just, piggybacking off the 96 Bill Clinton
yep,
Act. And yeah, it's just like it legalized propaganda.
yep,
I mean,
and
that's
the Smith-Mundt
100% what it
Act,
did. Yeah,
repealing that,
Smith-Mundt Act. Yeah, that's the one. And when you hear what Clinton says in that speech in 96 too, it's such a joke, man. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
it's cleared as day, and everybody in that room knows what's happening. Like we're the only ones, right, standing
yeah,
there buying, the political theater playing out in front of us. It's like when Lindsey Graham and Kamala Harris, right after they think the cameras are off, they go, "Oh, great performance." You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like, it's
yeah,
100% what they do, and it's so dumb that people have bought. One that they even read the bills and legislative actions that they try and act like they're so behind in supporting
yeah.
and they don't know shit, man. They haven't read a single word of it. I guarantee it, right?
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah,
all they're
they just
doing
know from party, the party, string pullers,
yeah,
which ones to get behind and which ones
exactly.
to, I mean, you gotta think about it too. The party line division, it doesn't
Mhm.
exist. That's all
Oh
for
my
cameras. And
100%.
who do you think, like, these old timers that have been in our whole lives and, probably lives of most of our parents,
Right.
they Joe Biden, you know, uh, all of these people, they have kids and grandkids and stuff. Well, all their kids and grandkids go to the same school. All of these people, they go get dinner together because you got to think about it. Like, cops hang out with
Oh,
cops, right? Like, firemen hang out with firemen,
oh, yeah.
construction workers hang out with construction workers. There's not too many outside group influence, and it's kind of just a natural human thing that it develops that way.
No
Uh,
doubt.
and so these politicians are hanging out with each other.
Mhm.
I mean, they can't really hang out with anyone else, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
It's not
And,
like they're gonna go hang out with Joe Schmo, you know?
right. Kamala got her in kind of from Willie Brown, who,
Yeah.
by the way, Willie Brown super involved with Jonestown. I thought that was so crazy, man. But he's sitting there, hanging out with Jim Jones, giving, these like this huge party that they're all, convening with like the governor and like it's just absolutely
Yeah.
crazy what was happening at that point. But when you William Colby, right? I
Yeah.
mean, he once said in regard to Mockingbird, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, owns everyone of any significance in the major media, right? Director of the Central Intelligence Agency from September 1973 to January 1976 under President Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, during which he came under intense scrutiny due to the very public hearings investigating intelligence activities, the Church Committee and Pike Committee and all of this, right? But the fact that he said that alone, and I think it's just like, Noam Chomsky said, and there's a lot I don't like about Noam Chomsky now,
Same.
but
Same.
yeah, but I do agree with this statement. I think it's very poignant, and he wrote that the issue is whether we want to live in a free society or whether we want to live under what amounts to a form of self-imposed totalitarianism, with the bewildered herd marginalized, directed elsewhere, terrified, screaming patriotic slogans, fearing for their lives, and admiring with awe the leader who saved them from destruction, while the educated masses goose step on command and repeat the slogans they're supposed to repeat, and the society deteriorates at home. He who controls the media controls the minds of the public. And I just felt like
Yeah.
that's how I started my Mockingbird episode, because it was just that's what we're facing, right? We are facing a society that's largely corrupted and compromised, right? The
Oh, yeah.
structure of our society is inherently flawed, truly. I mean, it's like even with it's like how like, and believe me, I think the Constitution, there are many things worth conserving, right? I'm
Yeah.
not saying that there's nothing of value, but this was never the plan, as far as like this was never in the certain founding fathers, dude, this is what they were warning against,
Yeah.
right?
No.
And
We are under exactly what they described.
our
And
way of life is under attack.
yeah.
Just, I mean, I think that largely it seems like the masses are in lockstep, marching,
Yeah.
goose stepping on command, right? Like it really
Mhm.
does seem that way. And so whenever the moment comes and the next catastrophe, whether it's manufactured or not, arises, what are you going to do? Are you going to buy
Yeah.
into it? Are you going to believe it? Are you going to give them another win? Help them push the goalposts even farther? Help them achieve even more than they have already?
Yeah.
Like, we have to put a stop to this. And the only way is to be aware of what
Yep.
we have to defend ourselves against. And I don't see anything coming out of channels of the mainstream media, or I don't even see any maybe Thomas Massey, I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably
I
it.
mean,
And
Rand Paul's going after Fauci,
right,
which
which
is, he hasn't always been 100% great.
yeah.
Um,
No, but that's valuable though.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's
All I
just a
ever say
small
about
handful of
Rand
people.
is be more like your dad.
I know. I know. Granted,
Right.
he has been getting better,
He
but
has
I
100%, man.
I mean, if I was him trying to fill those shoes, man, because I see kind of his character arc. He kind of at one point in his career went the other direction because he didn't want to be his dad,
Right. Yeah.
like I can't imagine trying to fill those shoes, but
No,
that's the
no
wrong
kidding.
direction. You have to be your dad. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Seriously, man. I mean, his speech when he left, Congress.
calling everyone psychos. Yeah,
I loved
it
every
the
second of
best
it,
thing
man.
ever.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I do want to move to, because this is kind of all fitting together.
Mhm.
I think one of the most important subjects out of any of this is MK Ultra,
Oh, yeah.
and
Definitely, man.
because to me, MK Ultra pretty much rules everything around us.
100%, buddy.
Everything
Yep.
that stems from, mind control with the media, all the way to brainwashing in the schools,
Oh, yeah.
everything. That's kind of where it all goes back to. Uh,
Yeah.
Fuck you, Alan Dulles,
Yeah.
and Sidney Gottlieb.
Yeah,
Which,
the Black Sorcerer of MK Ultra, they call him.
yep,
Yeah, yeah.
yep,
Yeah, well,
and
do you mind if I piss real quick? I'll be
no,
right
go
back,
for
dude.
it.
Okay, I'll
No,
be right
you were good. You were totally
Sorry,
good.
brother.
So, this is a good time to let everyone know that's still watching. Make sure and go check out Austin's podcast if you haven't. He does an absolutely amazing job in being able to break these stories down. I was actually just listening to it last night. As far as what I have going on, I've got articles coming out. Um, most of them are almost done. I've just rebranded my Substack. It is called Beware the Mockingbird. A little plug there. In fact, I'm going to do this right now. If you go and scan that QR code right there, it is actually going to pull up everything where you can find Rise to Liberty. I have started working on a thread on Twitter or X, whatever, all about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. You can find it at Rise to Liberty. I'm also working on getting it formatted into something else to be able to put it out for everyone else who's not on Twitter or X. That way other people can also consume it as well. But all of this dives into cults, the New Age movement, psychiatry. It's incredible, all the ties and connections. It has influenced so many things in so many different ways, which is why I think Austin could probably agree that MK Ultra, basically coming from Project or Operation Paperclip to bring all the Nazi scientists over, that was the start. MK Ultra was a result, and now everything from then is really why things are the way they are. So make sure and go scan that QR code, everybody, and make sure and check out Austin's podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, so MK Ultra, right? Like, I think that John Rappaport, he wrote this. He wrote this article. John Rappaport wrote this article that was titled "How the CIA Hid Their MK Ultra Mind Control Program," and he was talking about. He mentions John Marks in this, and
Yeah.
it's perfect. And so he begins with this story, starting back in the early 1990s when he spoke with John Marks, author of Search for the Manchurian Candidate. And according to this article, this was the book in 1979 that helped expose the existence and range of the infamous CIA MK Ultra program. Marks related the following facts to me, Rappaport claims. He had originally filed many Freedom of Information Act requests for documents connected to the CIA's mind control program. He got nothing back. Finally, as if to play a joke on him, someone at the CIA sent Marks 10 boxes of financial and accounting records. The attitude was, here, see what you can do with this. I've seen some of those records. They're very boring reading. But Marks went through them, and lo and behold, he found he could piece together MK Ultra projects based on the funding data. So eventually, he assembled enough information to begin naming names. He conducted interviews. The shape of MK Ultra swam into view. And so he wrote his book, Search for the Manchurian Candidate. Now, Rappaport says he told me that 3 important books had been written about MK Ultra, and they all stemmed from those 10 boxes of CIA financial records. There was his own book, Operation Mind Control by Walter Bauert, and The Mind Manipulators by Alan Shefflin and Edward Opton. And after publishing his book, Marks continued to press the CIA for MKUltra information. He explained to Rappaport that what then happened. A CIA official told him the following. In 1962, after 10 years of mind control experiments, the whole program had been shifted over to another internal CIA department, the Office of Research and Development, or ORD. And the ORD had 100 boxes of information on their MKUltra work, and there was no way under the sun, Marks was told, he was ever going to get his hands on any of that. It was over. It didn't matter how many FOIA requests Marks filed. He was done. The door was shut. The CIA went darker than it ever had before. No leaks of any kind would be permitted. In case there is any doubt about it, the idea of relying on the CIA to admit what it has done in the mind control area, what it is doing, and what it will do, should be put to bed by John Marks' statements. The CIA always has been and will continue to be a rogue agency. When I read that, man, I was so pumped up. That is perfect to me, right?
Oh yeah.
But and then you really consider like, and if you know Richard Helms and his role and what happened at Watergate, it starts to make so much more sense, because like before he was forced to resign, and he basically ordered the destruction of thousands and thousands of files in regard to MKUltra, and that's like the burning down of the Library of Alexandria for MKUltra, right?
100%.
Right. It like that's tragic to me that because of what we have, imagine what there was. Like that's kind of how I feel, right? Like the things that I've read that they are acknowledging, right? is so extraordinary in itself that I can't even imagine what those files that were prioritized for destruction might have, contained.
Yeah.
So who knows, my friend? But
yeah,
I mean, to get like, and I love how I got to tell you about this guy, Dr. Robert Duncan, in a second as well, because he kind of like blew my mind in regard to the modern Manchurian program, and how it's very possible, very likely. And why wouldn't it exist? At least in my opinion.
Well, that's my question is that, I mean, obviously MKUltra is done, but why would an organization that is openly so corrupt about those so many different things that they've admitted to certain things, and so this organization is obviously going to be worse than what they say publicly. Why, if they had the opportunity to be able to do these things, why would they ever give that up? You can't tell me they're going to just get exposed by the church committee, which didn't expose as much as people think. And then all of a sudden they're just plain nice.
Right.
That doesn't make sense at all.
Not at all. I heard you mention Frank Olson.
Yeah.
I can't remember if you or Jose did, but it came up, I remember. And like the main reason I haven't put Frank Olson's story in one of my podcasts yet is because of Wormwood. And so I like, to me, it was one of the first things that I found when I researched MKUltra.
Yep.
And I felt like it was so out there that it almost was like, okay, well, I can move past that and get into some different areas. But it is a very important story for people to be aware of. And it really seems like Olson, well, now we know by this point that he was forced out of that window. Beyond that, it seems the motivation was he became aware of what they were actually doing with MK Ultra,
Yeah, and he
and
was
that he
not
was gonna
okay with
blow the
it.
whistle. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
gonna blow the whistle, and so they spiked his they basically gave him LSD and then threw him out of a window. And,
yep.
and you know who worked that case? Detective James Rothstein, that same guy that I keep mentioning. Isn't that crazy? That honestly,
Oh
this
my
guy,
god.
yeah, he worked with Fiona Barnett to expose
Really?
yes, to expose the Kidman, Anthony Kidman and all of that, the connection in Australia with Boys Town and
Yeah,
how they were doing MK Ultra there. And man,
interesting.
it is crazy because yeah, man, Boys Town wasn't only being looted here,
Yeah,
as far as the Franklin scandal. It seems like this was again, how much I saw Gladio as a part of the Dutroux network. I know that it was Operation, um, what was it? 'Cause Phoenix was in Vietnam, but,
yep.
uh, damn it, what's the other bird? It's the one from, um, the Colonia Dignidad in Chile and
Oh,
replacing Allende with
uh,
Pinochet. Shit, man. It's basically a regional bird. It's just another regional
I
bird
I
for
I
that
can't
area.
remember. They are really well known for doing that though,
Uh-huh.
using birds.
Damn it.
Um,
It's alright. I'll remember later, but, it's the same exact thing. It's just,
yeah,
renamed. It's in a different area, and that's all that really took place, but the Colonia Dignidad cult that happened in Chile was a direct result of the rat lines set up through the Vatican and these Gladio networks, the stay behind networks of the CIA working in league with the Vatican to funnel these Nazis all over the world.
yeah.
And, Mengele himself was at Colonia Dignidad for a time, which is just insane, and there was a file there that was found. They had underground tunnels, it was crazy what they were doing, and they were living like it was 1940s Germany in this yeah. They to this day, they have Oktoberfest at this place, and it's just this group of Germans hanging out in Chile. It's
Not
pretty crazy.
suspicious.
Mhm. It's so nuts, man, but there's, like, a file there. They were doing, like, weapons, manufacturing. Like, I'm talking, you know, sophisticated weapons, right?
Yeah,
And yeah, and with the Dutroux network, the same company that was involved, it was a CIA front company, Wackenhunt, and it was involved with the octopus murders and Danny Castellero on the Cabazon Indian Reservation. And
interesting.
yeah, and
Which
because
is now kinda coming out into the public.
right, that Netflix series, which I still haven't watched, but but I
Me either.
do know I do know that they definitely didn't go the direction of Robert Maxwell, which
Yeah,
needs to be discussed because it clearly was one of the primary, as far as who was pushing the bugged promise software all over the world, selling it to different countries with a built-in backdoor. I mean, it was just a way to compromise
yeah.
people, yeah, and
Keep tabs on them.
exactly. But with MK Ultra, man, I mean, like Rappaport says at the end of that article, he says, to give you an idea of how far the CIA, the US military, and its allied academics will go in MKUltra research, here is what I wrote in 1995 about several human experiments. My information was based on the three key books I mentioned before, as well as Martin Lee's classic, Acid Dreams. Dr. Robert Heath of Tulane University, as early as 1955, working for the Army, gave patients LSD while he had electrodes implanted deep inside their brains. In the mid 1950s, Paul Hoke, MD, a man who would become Commissioner of Mental Hygiene for the state of New York, then a laborer in the field for the CIA, gave a pseudoneurotic schizophrenic patient mescaline. The patient had a heaven and hell journey on the compound. But Hoke followed this up with the transorbital leucotomy or lobotomy. Hoke also gave a patient LSD and a local anesthetic, and then proceeded to remove pieces of his cerebral cortex, asking at various moments whether the patient's perceptions were changing. People need to understand how the history of mind control and psychiatry are interwoven, and how the madmen and murderers within these professions are content to use torture in the name of science. And Dr. Robert Duncan, the guy that I mentioned earlier, he was a Harvard graduate. He investigator and author of the book Project Soulcatcher: Secrets of Cyber and Cybernetics Revealed. And he explained in 2012 that over the past 10 years, he had personally interviewed more than 650 people who claimed to have been under government mind control. Many of them said they were in the Manchurian Candidate ID program free. He went to the right. He went to the Senate Intelligence Committee and met with 26 senators, as well as the head of the LA FBI. After working with a consortium of scientists on a research project for over 8 years, he provided the closest estimate he could reach, that there are about 10,000 Manchurian candidates in the works being programmed by the CIA right now that can be used at any time around the world. However, he concluded by explaining that only a small percentage actually become successful Manchurians. This allows the CIA to apparently subvert certain international laws forbidding the agency to engage in the assassination of foreign leaders through the strategy of indirection, or utilizing agency handlers to indoctrinate individuals into these Manchurian Candidate programs, self-righteously asserting plausible deniability after the fact. So, according to Dr. Robert Duncan, a lot of these alleged mass shooters, such as James Holmes, fall into this Manchurian Candidate category. He suggests one of the ultimate priorities is to predominantly manufacture consent for landmark gun legislation, largely encouraging Americans to disarm themselves.
Yep.
When I heard him say this, I was like, this is exactly what I was already leaning toward. Yep. Right. And then I found this guy and read part of his book, and I was just like, all right.
But I mean, it makes so much sense with the psychiatry field, which is pumping a lot of these people full of SSRI medication, which has, a tendency to cause psychotic breaks and all sorts of terrible things, thoughts of homicide and suicide. And then you've got just the standard brainwashing that everyone is subjected to. You've already got somebody that's already, more susceptible to this sort of thing. You put them on some sort of chemical, mind-altering substance, and then you've got them kind of isolated. I know a lot of this actually happens on Discord. Drag that terrible company some. They've got these communities that people are a part of, and all of a sudden you've got this person trying to talk you into doing terrible things. And what's interesting is not that long ago, just I think like 3 months ago, the CIA and FBI were both busted as creating fake profiles to go in and go harass people in these communities. And so there's already a presence of them there. You can't tell me that they're not trying to get people to do stupid things.
No doubt.
They've been busted for that. So
just the level of antidepressants and different various pharmaceuticals that the average person is taking. Like, man, I'm so thankful that I'm not that person, and I don't want to be on any medication. You know what I mean? And and to see people I grew up with, like people I went to high school with, who they're single moms, they're taking antidepressants, they're acting like whores, like honestly, man, like you have no ethical foundation anymore. You're a parent, and you think it's 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 somehow, you know, um, it somehow props you up as a female and empowers you,
Yeah.
right? To
Yeah.
have to expose your body to strangers, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, man. Like, as a man, uh, if thank God I'm married to a woman that I respect and I admire, because, like, I couldn't imagine being out there right now in this
Yeah.
environment,
No.
in this landscape. Are you kidding?
No.
Like,
No wonder why guys are dropping out, and they're
that's
just
what I'm
like,
saying.
I I mean, it's kind of a joke, but hoflation, having to work twice as hard for a woman that's twice like, not even close to the quality woman that any of our
Mhm.
grandparents were, you know?
Right.
It
Yep.
it's just terrible, and it this whole, feminism thing is very clearly been taken up by the social engineers.
Oh, yes.
Because it's
Definitely.
it's all backwards thinking.
Mhm.
All of the very first feminists, the ones that are like, "Well, I agree with the ones that fought for the right to vote." Those are some of the worst ones. If you
Oh,
start
yeah.
looking into their history, I mean, a lot of
Right.
them were all devil worshippers, which, is neither here nor there necessarily. But just the type of person is which is why I think that matters, but, I mean, they
Right.
they were also pushing for the destruction of the nuclear family from the
Oh,
very
yeah.
beginning,
Yep.
and
But don't you see how these alleged look, I'm not saying that gay people don't exist or whatever, but I'm just saying that
yeah,
that that I see this pattern of an attractive once upon a time, an attractive female in their youth, in high school or whatever
yeah,
the case may be. They were popular. They peaked in high school, let's say. Then they get out. They have no physical discipline. They lose their shape. Maybe they have a kid. Maybe it's not as easy anymore. Okay. Well, then all of a sudden the man you were with no longer finds you attractive. I'm not saying that he's a good man, he's noble for doing this. I'm not saying any of that. But I am saying that we all have a role to play. And if you can't see what role you are playing and what fault is within that role, then and you can't reflect and hold yourself accountable, and
yeah,
you can't admit that you played a part, that could have facilitated this negative outcome. I mean, it's like that alone is a lack of reflection beyond this idea that, okay, now men are no longer finding me sexually attractive. What do I do? Right? And I mean, consider how many, and again, I'm not trying to be like super anti-female or something right now. But I'm just saying, like, this is what I'm witnessing
yeah.
from like, I have an older sister, she's 4 years older than me. I saw a lot of her friends. I grew up with them. They're going through this right now, and they all seem to fall on, the exact same political foundation, which is hilarious to me that, oh, yeah, your sexual choices and perspective and your perspective on gender and all of this happens to all fall within a political ideology, right?
Yeah,
It's
imagine
like,
that.
imagine, right? And
Yeah.
instead of going, okay, well, maybe I have a part to play in becoming maintaining my figure, being a little bit more sexually attractive, as well as, oh, I don't know, maybe trying to further my education, you know, become
Or just
enlightened,
have a personality.
have a personality. What a concept.
Yeah.
And it seems like this is it's being rewarded. That
Yep.
is being rewarded in this environment. And so, what do you expect to happen? But
Yeah.
yet you see all of these people who are, "Oh, I'm a lesbian now," but they're both fat, and they're but, it's like,
Yeah.
and one of them's acting like a man, but they act like they don't play the gender roles. Well, then
Yep.
why are you fitting into the gender role and
Yeah.
playing exactly the same game while you sit there and attack the nuclear family, while you try and recreate it, right, in these
Yeah, it's
ridiculous
all
inverted
image.
circumstances,
Yep.
right? And it really is an inverted world that we're living in,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And it seems like a part of almost like a part of that satanic doctrine with the process, which
Yep.
is in line with the OTO Aleister Crowley vein of this accelerationist idea of chaos ushering in the end times sort of scenario,
Yep.
right? And no matter what you believe in regard to that, like there are people out there that believe that, and they
Yep.
believe that's their role, and they are living that way, right?
Yep.
And so I just feel really bad for these children that are being exposed. First of all, I feel bad that so many people seem to just casually have a child, and I'm not saying that I'm pro-abortion at all. Like, I'm just saying that you you need to be responsible. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And the last thing you better be doing is having a child without considering the consequences. I mean, my God, and
There's
I
so
know
many
I'm
people that have no business
exactly. Man.
being parents. I
Yeah.
mean, they themselves are living so recklessly, which I'm libertarian in many aspects, so it's like, okay, go ahead.
Right.
Don't bring your shit to me, keep it away
Mhm.
out of my life, but I can't tell you not to. And not to
Right.
mention, it will work out in my favor anyways, because if you don't change that lifestyle,
Mhm.
I mean, it doesn't lead to anywhere good. The
Right.
only problem I have with it now is because we have to pay taxes to pay health care and all this other stuff.
Definitely.
So I'm, subsidizing these people's lifestyle, and I don't like that.
Right.
I do find it interesting though, and we'll start wrapping up here so I don't keep you too long. But I think it's interesting because the satanistic aspect to all of this, right? It's especially with satanic ritual abuse or
My
SRA.
gosh.
This is, in my opinion, one of the most pervasive issues in our society. And
Agreed.
it's like people can believe all of these things separately. Yes, we
Mhm.
know Satanists exist. Okay, yeah, they accept that. They know cults exist. Okay, we accept that. They know about all of this, like black operative, um, government agency, MK Ultra, mind control stuff. Like all of this stuff exists separately, but as soon as you put any of it together,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden you're a crazy conspiracy theorist that doesn't exist.
Right.
And that is insane to me. But even outside
100%,
of
bud.
that, um, it doesn't even have to be like these real people, because I hear a lot of people be like, "Oh, well, they're not Satanists or whatever," or the edgelord atheist stuff. Just Satan doesn't exist, and it's like that's kind of besides the point, or beside the point. It even if Satan doesn't exist,
Mhm.
they believe it,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they are working from a point where it does. And
Exactly, man.
so it's like it's a self manifestation. They're bringing this energy into existence, and they're doing terrible things because of it. So whether, regardless of what you believe about God, heaven, all of this,
Mhm.
you know, bigger picture things, it doesn't matter, because these people are self manifesting these terrible
Oh,
things
yeah,
that
man.
exist. And why is it that some of the most terrible people seem to be always connected back to all of these situations? I mean, we're talking Pizzagate, Franklin scandal, Epstein and Maxwell, Jimmy Seville,
Oh,
Finders.
God.
It it doesn't
Jimmy
exist, right?
Savile,
But
dude.
yet it keeps coming up. It keeps coming
Uh-huh.
up, and all of these people are connected to it. And I think, like I said, this is one of the most important aspects of what's happening now, especially because we're told not to look at it, and that it's like one of the
Mhm.
most dangerous theories out there.
100%, man. You just you mentioned Pizzagate. I'm sorry, but all you have to do is look up the Podesta artwork and tell me that that's
Yeah.
okay. That's all I'm saying, man. Like, the Kim Noble stuff is disturbing as hell, man.
Yeah.
And they they are literally in it seemed like they're acquiring trophies from people they've victimized and abused, and
Yeah.
potentially even MK Ultra victims as well, which one of them seems to be. And many of them have this MDD, multiple personality disorder, dissociative personality disorder. What's up, buddy? Jose, man, I love him. What's so crazy about that is that when I started my podcast, I legitimately, my very first episode was MK Ultra, right? And which is hilarious, right? Like, of course, that was my first episode, but I only reached out to 2 people, right? And it was Jose was the first person. I sent him, like, honestly, mainly because I resonated with him and what he was
Same.
doing for the Terrence Yakey coverage, and how much I resonated with Yakey's story in the first place, and then to have Jose just be a genuine person and truly care about trying to bring attention to something that matters like that, and how much of an example it really can serve for one,
Yeah.
the official narrative. Clearly we can't take things at face value, but also what they're willing to do to cover things up, right? And so I just thought, like, I don't know what it was, but I was like drawn to reach out to him, and then just randomly I saw Sam, and I love Sam Tripoli to death, and I saw him
Sam's great.
yeah, I saw him tweet about Ruby Ridge, and so I was like, what the hell? Like, I just got
Yeah.
done with my Ruby Ridge episode, and so it felt like kismet,
Yeah.
and so I sent it to him right away, and then just kind of reached out and said, if I've been loyal to the foil and a part of the swarm for a while now, brother. Like, if you ever want to
Hell
have a
yeah.
conversation, I would love to. And then it materialized, and it's just been like, I'm just so grateful, because
Yeah.
they're just the people. That was the hardest part for me during COVID, was I felt so isolated, man, and all I was so desperate for was to be able to have conversations like this, to be able
Yeah.
to talk with people who, yeah, they're like-minded, but they're genuine. They are authentic people who truly are passionate about these things, and they're trying to improve. They're trying to better themselves. They're trying to grow.
Yeah.
And that's all I could ever want, is to surround myself with people like that as much as I can. Because
I agree.
if you're not trying to push forward, right, and become a better person on a daily basis, you're probably going the other direction, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
And so I think again, man, this is a interesting life we're living, but but
Yeah.
I think there's value here. I think that people are desperate to hear genuine conversations like this and not feel alone, because that's how
Yeah.
I felt. I felt like every time I heard a
Same.
conversation like this, felt like I was in heaven for a minute, like, thank God I'm not alone, right?
Mhm.
And so anyway, but
No,
yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, that's like I felt this, draw to Jose for sure, and his coverage of OKC, which is just phenomenal. Not to take away from anybody else who's ever done work, but because I mean, us talking about MK Ultra right now,
Mhm.
we aren't the first people to,
No, absolutely not.
and we're not going to be the last.
Mhm.
But as time moves on, there's ways that people can package ideas, and I think that that's what's important. Even if we keep telling the same story over and over and over again,
I do too.
which is why I started my show, because I saw the censorship coming down,
Mhm.
and that's when I said, enough, I've got to do something. Like, I
Right.
talk about all this stuff, I believe this stuff.
Mhm.
It's time for me to put my money where my mouth is, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why we're talking right now.
Definitely.
I find value in having conversations with people actually doing something, speaking the truth, because that's my ultimate northern light, is the truth.
Right.
And that's why this
100%.
show exists. And that's why I wanted to have you on today, because you're covering subjects that I mean, other people are definitely doing it. I think you're particularly really good at doing it, and
Thank you.
I like the way that you do it. So, um, but also these are the topics that affect all of us right now. It's
Oh
the
yeah.
reason why things are the way they are.
Hmm.
And I mean, to change anything, we need to know, to know where you're going, you got to know where you're from.
Exactly. Um,
And I'll keep repeating these stories until people get it.
exactly. And and if I remember my first episode, I think I even started it with Ron Paul once said, "Truth is treason in an empire of lies."
Yeah.
Right?
Hell yeah.
And I think I followed it up with, "This podcast is for anyone with an appetite for truth, no matter the consequence." Right?
Yeah.
And I I remember thinking I wanted to I just wanted to every podcast that I've done, I really try and do it the way I want it, as far as, like, as an audience member,
Yeah.
kind of like that was my goal, was to kind of bridge the worlds between I was huge into libertarianism and, you know, at least, like, kind of the ANCAP theory in a way, but I've I've kind of I don't know, I'm just so disillusioned with the political process, and, it's
Same.
like, yeah, you can hold some values dear, but really, I just am so I can't stand government, and I don't wanna use it as a tool either. It's just
Yeah.
like that's just kind of how I feel, but my main goal was I saw how careful everyone was in that community whenever they would discuss anything in regard to conspiracy, right? And
Yeah.
it bothered me because it was like there's so much credibility and evidence out there. And we can do more to kind of bridge the gap when it comes to, oh, well, we can't even discuss it because it might damage our credibility,
Might
or
look good or look
yeah,
bad,
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then all of a sudden we're labeled conspiracy theorists. And then I heard, no matter what anybody says about Sam, I love the idea of tinfoil hat. Take it back, right?
Yeah.
They created that term, let's embrace it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, fuck it, right? Like, we can turn it into something beautiful, because in
Yeah.
reality, all it is a pursuit for the truth despite the consequence,
Yep.
right? And that is all I could ever hope, is that as long as your intentions are pure, your goal is the truth, then we're gonna be okay. You know what
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean? Like, yeah. And so my main goal was to hopefully like touch on these third rails, that these taboo subjects, that Pizzagate, right? Like, you can't even mention that without somebody immediately categorizing you, right?
Mhm.
And that was the point of
Yep.
Pizzagate as the term. And so I wanted to try and lend credibility and offer a little bit more legitimacy to the ideas, just by like kind of putting you in the moment as much as I can, because that's my goal, is to try and feel what it was like in the landscape at the time. And what I love so much about trying to isolate the clips, sometimes I'm more successful than others, but um but yeah, I think they're valuable because to me, I feel like I can kind of contextualize it all a little better. And I think, especially for, like, all the things that took place throughout the 60s and 70s in regard to the political turmoil of that age, like, for people in our generation, it's just really important that we're able to imagine what it was actually like. And it's the only way we can learn and apply it to today, right? And so anyway, it's I hope it's providing some value in regard to, that vein of, "Oh, wow, I really just dismissed Pizzagate, but now, holy shit," right? And
Yeah.
and I'm hoping that that will hopefully be the case. But at the same time, it's like just by the name itself, I should, the calling my episode Pizzagate might have been a mistake if I'm trying to reach certain people,
Yeah.
right? So who knows? But
Yeah.
anyway,
I mean, what I've learned is there are always going to be the ones that are already closed off to everything. Their
definitely.
pineal gland is so calcified.
All that
There's no way.
fluoride.
Yep, there is absolutely zero chance of them opening up to any of this, and I see that, and that's what a lot of these people want. They want the mindless, useful idiots to be
Oh
able to
yeah.
go out, discredit all of these things. But luckily for us, COVID, they pushed too hard too quickly,
Oh
and
yeah.
it shook people awake. And it shook more people awake than I think they ever intended to. And so this is
Definitely.
a growing awareness of these things that are going on. And so trying to get this information out there the way that any of us have been able to, and I think we need to try in any possible fashion at all,
Mhm.
to get it out there,
Definitely,
because
man.
there's things meant to discredit us. There's in my opinion what things are actual conspiracies, in the sense of what people think of when they hear the term. There's um and then, not to say that like anything doesn't exist or does exist, but there are just certain topics out there that I think are meant to poison the well. you
Oh
know
yes.
Flat earth
Definitely.
being one of them has
Yeah.
been. And I don't think it matters whether it's true or not, and even if it is, it doesn't affect my life.
Right.
I don't give two shits.
I know.
Um, and so, but there's these like things that are meant, I guess, more as entertainment, but they've been weaponized against us, against the things that actually are real.
Mhm.
They're not theories, and these things affect our lives. And personally, I'm sick of seeing the world be this way, because it's only going to end with a digital chip implanted in all of us, and us being
Mhm.
scanned like cattle. And
Oh man.
so if I've got to talk about some things and be called crazy because of that, I'll do it,
Mhm. No kidding,
So
right? Um, that Dr. Robert Duncan that I mentioned earlier, he legitimately suggests in that book, cybernetics and or like cyber and cybernetics revealed, or forget the name now. Project Soul Catcher was the name, but he like legitimately kind of details like that the modern approach to Manchurians, and it seems like he really has talked to all those different alleged Manchurian candidates who were a part of that program. And so he says it was through a combination of drugs, manipulative psychological techniques, and advanced cybernetics that they achieved
yeah,
many of the goals of the CIA's top secret program in human behavioral modification, or MK Ultra. And he says that modern day technology does not require brain implants, although they do work very well, he says,
yeah,
but they seem to rely much more on post-hypnotic suggestion. And one of their goals was to create split personality spies so they could pass information without even knowing it, and even commit murder with no memory of the crime so they could still pass a polygraph test. So, among the various techniques used throughout the process is something called the voice of God technology, like through EMF.
yep,
And even while they are sleeping, these subjects are kept in dissociative states and can allegedly be programmed with subliminals. So often these targets can be manipulated through the use of microwave hearing effects or voice transformation, such as using the voice of a dead relative to implant ideas in the subject's mind, which immediately reminded me of that Amazon Alexa bullshit where they're literally reading their like audiobooks from a dead
yeah,
grandma to a grandkid and acting, oh, how sweet.
yep.
Isn't this wonderful technology?
No,
Absolutely not, my friend. But he even goes as far as to say that that neuroscience has become the modern battleground where war wages on over the control of the human mind. Cybernetic warfare, he says. The 21st century will be known as the age of spiritual machines and soulless men. And,
Yeah.
like, that guy is a wealth of knowledge as well, and I was very happy to have found him. But there's this in the James Holmes episode, I talk about this woman named Lynn Hersha, who co-authored a book with her sister, and it was titled Secret Weapons: How Two Sisters Were Brainwashed to Kill for Their Country. And as Lynn writes in the book, what angers me is the loss of control. This was really sad to me. At any moment, someone could come to me, be dressed the right way, and use the right code, and I no longer have free will. I will do anything that person requests. I hate them for that. Nothing else is as bad as knowing that I am always out of control, knowing that I am still a laboratory experiment, a puppet whose strings are hidden from everyone but my handlers, and I don't yet know how to break free.
Heavy duty.
Could you imagine, man?
Yeah.
Like, it made me think of that guy who like broke into that amusement park and like at night.
Yeah, recently.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
in
broke into the
Colorado.
bathroom and then like wrote something on the mirror or something.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then
not a
killed
killer.
himself. Yes. I immediately thought of this
Yep.
because imagine, brother, imagine if you wake up to your programming. Oh my God. You
Mhm.
realize what they're attempting to make you do. You
Yep.
realize that maybe you won't be able to stop yourself.
Yep. Yeah, that story caught my attention as well because of that very thing. And it's like I don't know another explanation. He had to have broken his programming somehow.
Yeah.
And came out. And unfortunately, meeting that end, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but
Me neither, man.
I am, if that had to happen, at least I am happy that the story made it out. And
Definitely.
it's going to be memory hold. Well, unless people like us can do our jobs well.
Right.
And, it's just really interesting. This is what frustrates me. This is all known. You don't you can do a simple Google search. I mean, if you go and read the Wikipedia page for MK Ultra, it is incredibly honest.
It really is.
Like, it's so crazy. Out of all the things that are not honest on Wikipedia, because it's a garbage controlled state run source of information,
Oh, yeah.
it is brutally honest.
It is.
And so all of this information is so readily available. If people choose to not know, then it's kind of their fault for things being the way that they are.
Yeah.
I personally believe that if people really understood, they would be horrified and they would not be okay with this. And then I think that's why what we do, what others do, is so important in showing this. Whether we have to tell a story from 70, 80 years ago over and over and over again and repackage it and, present it in any way possible. But so I do got to say, that's why I wanted to have you on, because I view what you do, your show, is so important. And I think you're an important voice in all of this. So as we build all of our platforms and stuff, I think it's important we build our own networks to be able to keep this going out there, because there's other things that are important as well, obviously, but us and all of our peers doing this, I think we all play an important role, and it's probably going to go unthanked. And you know what? So be it.
Right. Exactly,
So,
man.
I think on that we'll wrap up, because I definitely want to get you back. I want to get into like the Vegas shooting and stuff, because that's something that you have talked about. And I didn't feel right about that while it was going.
Right.
It felt weird. I didn't like it. I
Mhm.
didn't like the news coverage, and there's just so much, and I don't know too many other people covering that other than you.
Thank you, man.
Um, so on that, let everyone know where they can find you, where they can get more.
Awesome. First of all, Jacob, thank you, brother. Like, thanks for having me on. Anybody willing to have a conversation with me,
Yeah.
I'm forever grateful. And beyond that, I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, we must create alternative systems. It's the only way.
Yep.
We have to be able to opt out. We have to be able to opt out, and therefore we will create a network of like-minded individuals and fight back, man. But yeah, you can find my podcast at pretty much any audio streaming platform. It's the Underclass Podcast. You can follow me at the Underclass Pod on Twitter, at the Underclass Podcast on Instagram. You can support me at Patreon, patreon.com/the Underclass Podcast, and Buzzsprout as well. So
Hell yeah. And I've got all of that linked down in the episode description. You also do Almost or Already Dead with
yes,
Jose of No Way
Jose
Jose.
Galison.
Yeah, it kind of seems like we're both working with him. Make sure and go check his channel out. I'll make sure and edit
Definitely.
and throw his stuff in there as well, because
Awesome.
there's just so many good things, all the things he's covered. And
Right.
you've got that Watergate episode you did recently, which, when I started in just thinking this way, getting into the conspiracies and stuff, I never knew
Mhm.
how important that was.
I didn't
Like,
either.
it kind of just write it off and just be
Yeah.
like, yeah, Richard Nixon was an asshole. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, actually, no, he won almost every single state when he was
That's
elected.
true. Oh, yeah.
And we've been psyoped into believing that he was just a terrible person. And
You're right.
he wasn't a great person, but
No,
he's not what we were told.
exactly. Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. There's so much to Watergate. It's so crazy, man. But
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Well, hey, Austin, thank you so much again.
thank you, brother.
For everyone else, you can go to risetoliberty.com/links. The 3 most active places you'll find me is Instagram, Twitter or X, and Telegram. Those are pretty much where I put all of my energy. Substack will be added to that. I'm just taking Substack very seriously. The things that are coming out on Substack, I've got to be worried about honoring survivors and making sure I'm respectful to those people, because it's incredibly important to me. Also, I don't want to damage my credibility in any of this. So,
Right.
it's really important. So everyone else, go check everyone out that we've mentioned. This is all important work. You will be seeing a lot more coming from all of us, I am sure. And our big tech overlords hate this sort of stuff. So go make sure that you can find us on other platforms. Don't lose contact. So one thing I did want to ask real quick, Austin. I always ask everyone this right at the end, because I eventually will get a huge supercut if everyone's giving their answer. But
Okay.
one thing I want to know is, why does liberty matter?
Liberty matters because without it, you can't be an individual, right? The individuality is entirely removed. And I think that the worst thing that could ever happen to a person is to join a collective ideology and not remain grounded within who they are as an individual, with their foundational principles intact, defined, understood. Without liberty, there's no individual sovereignty, and therefore we're a part of the problem. We're a part of the collective, and the collective aren't going anywhere that I would like to end up, right? So I think liberty and individual sovereignty is of utmost importance at all times and should always be the northern light, like you said earlier, because otherwise we lose hope. And I refuse to lose hope. Like, we have to steer into the white pill. Like, we have to remain hopeful. It's dark out there. You can find yourself in some clandestine corners you never imagined possible. But the world's still a beautiful place. You have to see the beauty, you know. But man, I think understanding the darkness, it makes it that much more beautiful, right?
Yeah.
When you see the beauty.
Yeah.
So anyway, liberty is and should always be the underlying subtext that's
Yeah.
constantly occurring repeatedly in our minds, and hopefully we can somehow gain some more individual sovereignty back into our lives and implement it at a level where we experience it on a daily basis, and much more than we are now. And like I said earlier, we must be able to opt out. And
Yeah.
without alternative systems, there's no other option. So
Hey,
that's what
I
liberty means.
think that's a perfect answer. I absolutely love it. One more note, just so everyone's aware, black pills are a government psyop meant to stop hope.
Yes.
And so, right there, be aware of the black pills. They are hazardous to your health, and make sure to report all black pill merchants because they are spreading hopelessness.
Yes,
And
sir.
that's nothing we can have. Things are not hopeless. And, you know, people like us will continue to spread the hope through maybe not the brightest message, but it's a way to fight for a better future. So I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. Austin, hang out in the background, and everyone else, until next time, stay free, my friends.